Hello everybody and welcome back to City Skylines 2. Today I'm creating the first of hopefully many tutorials here for City Skylines to help you guys understand how to make a clean, efficient city that works well. The first tutorial that we're going to be creating today is going to be about roadway hierarchy, which here we are. Now right now it may look a little bit confusing. All you see is just a giant grid and that's about it, with some industrial on the right and residential in the middle with commercial on the outskirts. But I'm going to show you guys how exactly this makes sense and why it works so well when you're creating a city, and how you can implement this in your own towns. So first, we're going to be going off of what exactly roadway hierarchy is. Well, it's the subdivisions of different roads to classify them into different categories. These categories are about 4, maybe 5, it kind of depends, but in this case, we're going to be going over just the 4 main roads. The first one is your highway. These have the lowest amount of access, however, they have the highest amount of mobility. This can be applied over on the outskirts of the city, where we have one entrance and hopefully one exit point. I say hopefully because there is both an entrance and an exit point on both of these sides of these intersections or interchanges, which is another thing I'm going to mention. This is an interchange, this is not an intersection. Sometimes I even get them mixed up since it's kind of a little confusing, but yeah, this is an interchange. An interchange is for highways, an intersection is for roads. So just keep that in mind. When you're designing a highway to actually create entrance and exits for the city, make sure you have an entrance and an exit for both sides of the points. So in this case, this city has 2 points of entrance and exits, equaling up to 4 points. This increases the access of people actually being able to get into the city, as if they don't want to take this interchange, they can take this interchange instead. If you have just one entrance and then one exit point, say the entrance was just here and then the exit point was right here, traffic could back up because then we have everybody trying to leave and everybody trying to enter in one point. However, the traffic capacity essentially doubles, and it basically acts as a 4-lane highway instead of just a 2-lane, except it's spread out into 2 different points. These are also placed strategically to make sure that people can either A, go to work, so one is closer to an industrial area where most people are probably working, and then this one is closer to our shops, our tourist areas, and our residential. However, both have ease of access towards the middle of the city. The next road that we're going to be talking about is the main arterial road. These are usually wider and they have more access, however they have a little bit less mobility. They are typically the roads found right after you leave the highway. So take this one, Emerson Street, this one would be our major arterial, aka the roads that either A, go around a city, or B, they connect into other roads as well. You can see how most people are traveling along these roads and how easy it is for them to actually get to work because it's organized in such a way to where they can leave the highway and then immediately go to work. Now, while this won't work for, say, a city with 100,000 people, it certainly is good for smaller towns, as it's just easier to organize your thoughts and ideas, and there's an easier way to change them. They typically have a higher amount of traffic capacity, and in this instance, this would probably be a 6-lane road at this point. However, in this case, I'm not going to be using a 6-lane road, as they don't need to be. The size of an arterial doesn't matter, however, the way it's placed and how it actually functions does. So when I talk about access, I'm talking about how many ways a car can actually get onto Emerson Street. So let's take a look at these points. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, spread out over about 4 miles of road. That's quite a low amount of access. However, that decreases the amount of traffic on the road because then we don't have a million points going into the street, and it just helps to organize out the streets. Arterials should be used when people are entering the city and exiting the city. They shouldn't be used onto every single street, as it can cause traffic backup. These are more commonly known to have areas with street lights and things like that. There's also a lower amount of pedestrian access. If you look in America, there's a thing called a strode, which is typically a main arterial road. However, these don't have sidewalks and are incredibly unsafe. So typically, pedestrians or citizens of a town would like to avoid main arterials, as they're typically more unsafe since they're more car-centric. What people do like to walk on are collector roads, which are right by our local roads. Collector roads are typically the same size, however they can be smaller. Again, the size of a road doesn't matter, but how it functions. So let's take this road right here. We can see how it has a decent amount of entrance points. Now, this may look like lower amounts of entrance points over this road, which has about 10 points over 4 miles. However, this one has 1, 2, 3, 4 points over 700 yards. This means that if this was spread out over 4 miles, this would probably have over 30 points of access if it was that long, which is good. These are what collector roads are. You can see how they essentially collect the cars that are supposed to go onto the neighborhood roads or the local roads. There's not much to really say about collector roads, as they function very similarly to arterial roads. However, they have a higher amount of access but a lower amount of mobility. So expect to see lower speeds along collector roads, higher speeds along arterial roads, and even higher speeds on the highway. There can also be multiple points of intersection for major collectors, such as right here, Amity Street, which is placed strategically near high-density streets. This could be classified as well as a local road, as it divides off of a major collector. The next road that we're going to be talking about are our local roads. These are most commonly to be small roads. The size of a local road actually does matter, as typically they are 2-lane roads. Or they can be 4-lane, but I don't really see how that would be used unless if you have like a mega city with 5 million people. Take New York City, for example. While this is a city that is over 500 years old, it still has 2-lane roads to this day. And traffic, while it's a common stereotype in New York City that traffic is terrible, it's only bad in areas where there's high density. Lower density areas, the traffic's actually really good, and most of the streets there are 2-lane local roads. These connect right off of major collectors, and you can see how many points of access all of these local roads have. They are typically smaller, and this is the bare bones building blocks for our grid, which is used to just zone higher density housing, as you can see right here. This is typically created for areas of suburban, medium density, higher medium density, and high density. Every type of building can be built on this road, and local roads are by far the most versatile. However, the issue with them is that they can cause 2 issues. One, they have lower speeds. Typically, the speed limits are way lower than, say, a street that's a major collector. In this case, Pacific Street and our major collector right here are about 5 miles per hour difference. So if you're driving onto Pacific Street, you're going to have to go 5 miles per hour slower. This might not seem like a big issue, can be if traffic starts to back up. In this case, it doesn't in my city. However, it can, and it can cause a thing called gridlock if you use a grid system. This can happen in many areas of not suburban areas, but rather higher density areas where, say, our apartment buildings will be. Local roads typically have a super high amount of access, but a low amount of mobility. So, what exactly is mobility? Well, mobility is basically how fast a car can travel on the road. Let's take this highway for instance, Grove Highway. The speed limit is 70 miles per hour. If you're in the EU, it's about 120 kilometers an hour. This is pretty darn fast, but you wouldn't want this to be on, say, a major arterial. So the thing is about mobility is that technically the mobility would increase the flow of traffic, however, it would decrease the amount of safety. So you're gonna more commonly see, like right here, a car accident happening on a highway rather than a major arterial, and even less on a major collector, and even less on a local road. That's why local roads are typically built near houses, as you wouldn't want people flying 50 miles per hour down past your house, because that's incredibly unsafe, and that's also where most of our pedestrians walk. So you don't want that happening. But on this, you wouldn't expect to see pedestrians walking down highways, so you're going to have the highways be faster. And that's kind of where they get the name of highway. They're the highest form of transportation, but they have the lowest amount of access, while local roads are the complete opposite, having low speeds, but higher amounts of access. But a lot of people tend to get confused by this, and while you can sit there and say, well, Brett, I understand how these work, but how exactly can I implement this in my city in an effective manner? Well, this is a decent example. There's a lot of things that you have to keep in mind. One of them are public service buildings. these are your hospitals, police stations, fire stations, crematoriums, post offices, and other things like schools. Now I place these schools right here and here. You can kind of place schools and high schools however you want. Make sure to look when you look at the education meter, how many can go to school. In this case, I'm actually going to delete this because it turns out that we actually have maxed out our capacity for children to go to our elementary school, which is a bit of an issue in City Skylines 2. However, I'm pretty sure that they're going to fix it soon. So let's just go ahead and upgrade this building right here. Now we should have more people going to school. All right, so we have fixed that. So how can we implement these in strategic ways? Right now, they are on our major arterial roads, which is our medical, fire, police, and crematorium, as well as our post office. But how can we effectively place these to get the most out of their uses? Well, first things first, and ignore what I'm doing right here. I'm just importing city services so that this guy gets garbage, which is not going to be a thing that we're going to talk about in this tutorial. So how can we place these effectively? Well, our medical clinic will have to be placed more near residential. So while it is good that it's placed near a main arterial road, it is much better that it's placed near areas of commercial and residential. Right here is a pretty good place, as it's near a couple of roads. But one thing that you have to consider is which way you want it to face. A major collector road typically has a local road right behind it. Now, in this case, this is true. However, it doesn't apply to every street on Earth, but this is a good example of how it usually is. In my opinion, I would recommend having it be near a major collector, facing it. Now, this means that it's closer to residential, however, it's also near a major collector road, so it can also, if there's an accident, if need be, there's an accident by the commercial area, an ambulance can get there. If there's an accident near the higher density areas, an ambulance can get there pretty quickly because there are major collector roads. And then if it needs to travel over here, it can get there pretty fast. But you also have to consider how long it'll take to get from here to your farthest corner of your city. Now this, when we look at our medical graph, we can see that it reaches pretty darn far, and it reaches throughout our entire city. So that's good. This ambulance, when it's traveling towards our industrial district, it'll have to make these turns, which can add close to a minute, depending on traffic, of an extra time, which is not good for business. So what you can do is make sure that you really think about how your medical will be able to go. So in this case, it'll be able to get to our industrial district very, very quickly, as now it just has a straight line that it has to drive through. And while cars can drive through here, it also provides more access to our medical. The same instance can go for police stations as well, which can also be placed on major collectors. In this case, I'm going to be placing it closer towards our industrial district, right here. It's close to our major collector, however, it's also close to our major arterial. So actually, what I'm going to place it is towards our highway. Now, why is this? Well, think about it. Police officers typically don't just work in the town, but they work for the county as well. So, take it for my local town, we have a very small police force. Matter of fact, we have about 5 enrolled police officers in our town. I have a very small town that I live in. However, those same police officers can work all the way down into major cities if they need be, and they're basically on call. So what you would want is, in the event that these need to be used for other services outside of the town, you'd want their cars to have access to the highway. I wouldn't say put it right next to the highway, since this isn't really a good example of how it should look. It should technically look a little bit like this or like this, like an area where it's near a highway. Now, that doesn't mean, again, it doesn't mean that it needs to be right next to the highway. However, it should have easier access to the highway. So this means that it should have an area of lower amounts of traffic volume, have a faster road where the police officers can travel down. As, again, if there's an emergency, a car isn't going to follow the speed limit. An emergency response vehicle isn't going to follow that speed limit. It's going to go as fast as it needs to be to get to the area that it needs to go to. So we have to keep that in mind, in which case we have placed our police station near the exits and entrances of our highway. We can also place a police station right here, but if we're going to place it realistically, technically there would be another police station right here, but in City Skylines instance, one police station seems to be enough for our town, and we're only thinking about it in just a video game sense. Realistic sense, I'd be here for hours trying to explain to you guys how these work. So our next line of thought is our firehouse, which can be actually placed in both ways. This is a very versatile public service building, and it can be placed either way, however you see fit. It can either be placed in the same way as a medical service, or it can be placed towards a police station. In my opinion, I would place it near a police station, as I just find them to be a little bit more versatile. Typically, when I place my firehouses, I place them near major arterials, where they will have easier access to a faster highway, as these things need more time to accelerate. Think about how huge a fire truck is. Those things weigh a lot, and their acceleration speed is much lower than an ambulance, and much, much, much lower than a police car. So they'll need more speed to get up. So, as such, we're going to put it near the arterial road, so they'll have a longer amount of stretch of road to be able to speed up, and if they need be, get off the highway. Think about if there's an accident on this highway. Typically, a fire truck is actually dispatched even if there isn't a fire, because they also kind of work in joint with an ambulance. You'll actually typically see a lot of medical response teams, like an ambulance. So right here we have an ambulance. Typically, now this doesn't happen in City Skylines 2, but in real life it does, there's typically a fire truck or a smaller fire SUV that'll follow behind the ambulance, because they typically have and share medical equipment as well. And that's just kind of like how it works. And so yeah, when you're going to place your firehouse, you want it to be closer to a medical clinic, as they kind of join together in a joint operation, while police stations kind of do their own thing. That's where fire trucks and medical services sort of get their name of a first responder. They are the first ones to be on scene, as they follow each other. Now we have two more services that we have to go over: our death care and our post office. Two complete 180s to each other. So, now, unfortunately, death care would typically be placed near the medical clinic. This is a really sad thing to place it near, but in many countries this is actually how it's done. And it's even done in my town. We have a small medical clinic around there, and then about a mile down the road, we have our crematorium, or our funeral home near our church. Now, if we're placing it in a realistic manner, typically a crematorium or a cemetery would be placed near a church. There aren't any churches in City Skylines 2, unfortunately, which I hope that they do add, because it just adds an extra level of detail to our cities. And I don't know if they're in City Skylines 1 either, but chances are they probably aren't. But I do know that crematoriums are in City Skylines 1 as well. So where are we going to place this? Well, I would place it near our... Now this is a fully upgraded building, so it serves a lot of space. I would technically put it near a major collector. I wouldn't put it near an industrial district, but considering that it actually is a crematorium, it does produce air pollution. So I would put it around closer near our office buildings where a crematorium would be. You can technically place them anywhere, but because I don't know how much actual air pollution does pollute, so we're just going to place it for safekeeping near our industrial district. It has a decent amount of access to our lower density residential, and it also has decent access to our elementary school, which is a sad thing, but it does happen. Deaths do happen in schools, so you want to make sure that they do have access to those as well in a realistic sense. Medical clinics, you can see how it's about a mile down the road before you reach the crematorium, which is a good thing. That's how I wanted it to be designed, because you want to make sure that the crematorium is closer to the medical clinic, because in City Skylines 2, people can get failed treatment and they can unfortunately pass away, which does add realism to the game. And in that sense, there will be a hearse that is dispatched to the medical clinic and will pick up the dead. So you want to make sure that it does have ease of access towards the medical clinic. The last area that we have is our post office, which is again fully equipped and it's fully maxed out. This is by far the largest public service building that you're going to be placing, other than the large high school or university, but those aren't really public service buildings, those are educational buildings. I would place them towards the highway and near the industrial district. I don't typically care how exactly these are placed, because they don't really they only produce noise pollution, but it does look like an industrial building. So if you have like a warehouse area or something like that, if you're decorating, this would be a good asset to put down, as it does have a lot of garages and it looks pretty industrial. However, there are different public service buildings, like a small post office, which can be added towards like commercial areas and all that such. But we don't really need them since this is a pretty large city. And then the final one is our telecom tower. This one you just place down, it's pretty simple. So this ended up actually being 2 tutorials. One where I taught you about how to place down your public service buildings, and the second one, how to place down your roads. I hope that you learned a lot about these, and I hope you apply them into your town as well. And I would love to see if you left down a comment below to show me what your cities would look like before and after this tutorial, because I would really, really love to know. And a perfect place to share that would be in my Discord server, which you can join in the link in the description below. So, my name was Brett, everybody. I hope you took this tutorial to heart, and I really hope that you guys learned something. And if there's anything that I can improve upon or anything that I didn't know that you know, please share. I'm always up to learning new things, and I love to hear feedback from you guys. So, thank you for watching this tutorial, and even though there was a million things you could be doing today, you decided to play some City Skylines with me, and I really appreciate that. Have an awesome day, everybody. I love you all. Bye-bye.